Hey everyone, welcome to Healthy for My Purpose. I am absolutely excited about the speaker that we have to interview today. I actually met him at the Midwest Veg Fest in Kansas City, and I was absolutely blown away by his topic that he talked about. And I think you guys are going to be so intrigued by this message about the environment, climate change, all of that. And so I'm going to go ahead and introduce Dr. Sailesh Rao, and we're going to get into how we can save this planet. And you're not going to believe how we can do it, and how it ties into everything that Gigi and I have been talking about in terms of plant-based, going vegan, all of that. So, Dr. Rao, it's a pleasure to have you. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Awesome, awesome. So we're going to go ahead and jump in. Can you just start with just telling us a little bit about yourself, your story, your career, and kind of how you ended up into this whole climate healing process?
Oh, yeah. I was born in India, and then I grew up there until I finished my bachelor's in engineering. So I'm an electrical engineer by profession. And then I came to the US to do my graduate studies. So I did my master's in Long Island, and then I did my PhD at Stanford in California. But I specialized in electrical systems engineering. And after graduation, I worked on the internet and high-speed signal processing. So I was working on HDTV protocols. I was working on communication protocols, especially the internet. And then, I had a success in the internet arena because I was able to. I was proposed a transformation from analog to digital in the communications protocol, and they accepted my proposal, and it became a standard. And we did the device for Intel, and Intel put it on their motherboard, and suddenly 150 million units of what I designed was out there in the world. Right? So I thought I'd be the pinnacle of success as an engineer. And then I was not feeling so happy about it. Why am I not fulfilled? And then I was working on doing the same thing 10 times faster. And this time it was very political because when I was working on the internet before, it was nobody knew what the internet was. Everyone thought it was something that techies are working with, right? Then it became so popular, and now there was so much politics in the standard, and it was a mess, and I didn't want to. My heart was not in it. And I came home one day, and I sat down on the TV and turned on the TV, and there was uh, Al Gore talking about climate change, and I was so shocked by what he was saying. I told my wife, if half of what he's saying is true, what in the heck am I doing? Why am I working on this? She's told me, if you think it's that important, why don't you look into it? So I did, and within 3 months, I told her we have to shut down our company and focus on this full time because it's a much bigger systems problem, and it's consequential for future of humanity, for our children and grandchildren. So she said, okay. So we closed our company, and I wrote to Mr. Gore and I said, how can I help you? So that's how I got involved in this. I started working on it full time in 2006. Since 2006, I've been doing this. And in 2007, I started Climate Healers. And the idea of Climate Healers is that how do you heal the climate? Because everyone in the mainstream is talking about how do you prevent it from getting much worse than what it is. Okay. And maintaining it in a high state of disrepair. I'm saying, no, no, how do you heal it? How do you bring it back to uh, normalcy, right? So that we can then tell our children, this is, you have to maintain it like this. So that was the idea behind Climate Healers, and that's what I've been doing now for the last 17 years.
Wow, that's remarkable. So when you say that the work you were doing in technology was getting political, were you talking about political in terms of like geopolitical?
No, political in the sense people were not, they were not agreeing on simple things that you should agree to.
Yeah.
Like, you can only send so much on this wire and so on, these are simple things that we
like corporate politics.
Yes, yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I was going to say, I mean, because going into the climate space, it's hugely political, I think.
Right. Yeah.
And there's so many forces at play that want to keep the status quo,
Right.
you know, and continue down this path. And I would, you know, and I think also the fact that you are looking at it from the vantage point of healing the climate, not just stopping the damage from getting to the point to where it's irreversible, but actually repairing it and going back. Tell me more about like what take on it that what was your take on it that's different in terms of how you could go about actually healing the planet?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you look at it, you know, from a systems perspective, and you start analyzing what is really going on, you realize that it's our entire way of life that needs to change. Because our way of life is centered around how do we extract from the planet. And we are playing a game as to who can extract more, who can extract less. I mean, who's going to be the winner in this extraction game, right? So that's the kind of game we are playing. If you look at the money system that we have, it's all about returning debt back to a bank. So there is more debt than money at any given point in time, and the money is being used to extract from the planet in order to return the debt. And so this provides an impetus for growth at all times in the system. So you need to grow. Otherwise, the whole thing collapses. It's really a Ponzi scheme we're running, okay, with the planet as the base. And then we're wondering, hey, how come the planet is dying around you? Well, that's what you're doing. You're playing a game of who can extract the most without regard for what happens to the people who you're extracting from, or from the animals that you're extracting from, or the forests you're extracting from, right? So we need to now transform that to a game of restoration. Who can restore the most? And that's a different money game altogether. It's a different system altogether. And it's a different motivation that we all have. And that will be a different way of life. Because you are coming together now to figure out how to restore a forest that used to be there, how to restore a prairie that used to be there. Because why are we restoring? Because we know that the earth was stable when, 1500, 400 years ago, 500 years ago, the climate was stable. So we want to restore the climate that was there a couple of hundred years ago so that we can then maintain it forever. At this current increase in temperature, we don't know if it's stable or not. It keeps going up and up and up. Even if we stop pouring more and more greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, Earth herself may be pouring more and more greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, and she may go out of control. So we know that it's not in a very stable state at the moment. So we need to bring it down to a stable state and leave it there. That's how I would deal with it as a systems engineer.
Love that approach. Go ahead, Sersie.
I was going to say, so give us a little bit more on what that would actually look like. What would that look like for the larger people who are working on these systems, but what would that look like for the individual who's saying, I want to participate in this restoration? What would that look like? And what is actually the answer? What would we have to do? And tell me a little bit more about that.
So if you want to participate in the restoration of the planet, you have to first restore yourself. You have to restore your health. So when you are sick, you're not going to be interested in the planet. You have your own problems to deal with. So become healthy first. And then just like putting on your own oxygen mask before helping others on a plane, So get healthy first. And so we need to create a system in which everyone has access to healthy food. Everyone has access to knowledge about how to make their body healthy. So nature cure has to be sort of 101. You have to be taught that. And then once you get healthy, then you say, okay, you can volunteer at this place. Your food is taken care of, your shelter is taken care of, but you have to help us plant trees and bring back the animals that used to be there. Restore the water systems of the planet, so that you have more fresh water for the animals to drink. So we know all 6 planetary boundary violations in the life support systems of the planet. We know all 6 of those life support system violations can be reversed if the world goes vegan and we restore forests on the land that gets freed up from animal agriculture. So we know that. So there is a way forward. That's why I keep promoting Vegan World 2026. As soon as possible, we have to all go vegan so that we return land back to nature, and then we can restore the forest. But most of the time, nature will restore it herself, but we have to help her.
Yeah. So for those listening who may not be familiar with the 6 systems, can you just kind of summarize what those are?
Yeah, there are 9 planetary boundaries that the Stockholm Resilience Center identified. And those planetary boundaries have to do with the life support systems on the planet. Okay. Which means that if you go to Mars and you wanted to create life on Mars, conditions for life to thrive on Mars, you have to worry about these 9 life support systems. You have to create them there from scratch. Well, Earth already has those 9. And we have transgressed them, meaning we have made them go haywire. On 6 of them, they've gone haywire. And they are in couple of them are in the orange zone, and 4 of them are in the red zone. Red zone meaning if you leave it there, even one of those, if you leave it there, it can kill life as we know it. It'll destroy it completely. So we have no choice but to pull it back towards the green zone. Okay, so that should be our main focus. I'm saying, if your life support systems on the planet have gone to the red zone, you should be focusing on that full time, saying, how do I bring it back to the green zone? This is exactly what we did when we discovered the ozone hole, remember, in the 90s?
Mm-hmm.
We figured out how to patch it up and we implemented it. And now it is now in the green zone. Okay, that's one of the 9 that's in the green zone. The other one that's still in the green zone is aerosol, so which is the particles that you put into the atmosphere. You cannot have more than a certain amount of particles in the atmosphere, otherwise you will have respiratory deaths. So that's still in the green zone, meaning we haven't put enough. But we are trying to pull it towards the red zone, okay, because of all our emissions. And the ones that are in the border of green and the orange is the acidification of the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
That's the 3rd one. That's in the border. And some people claim it's already in the yellow zone now, not green. So the ocean is getting more and more acidic. As it gets more and more acidic, all the shelled creatures die off.
Mm-hmm.
Because they cannot build their shells anymore. If they die off, then it's the bottom of the food chain you're killing, and then the remaining will start dying off.
Yeah.
Right. So that's borderline between green and yellow. What is yellow now is the water cycle of the planet. So that's the freshwater cycle. We have impacted it to the point where there is not enough fresh water for wildlife to thrive. Okay, they're drying of thirst. So they cannot find water to drink. And even the water they find to drink is polluted. So they're getting diseases from drinking polluted water. Okay, so that's in the yellow zone. It's not yet red, but it's in the yellow zone. Next is land use. We have taken away, in total, 91% of the ice-free land area of the planet for ourselves. Only 9% is left for wild animals. So that has gone into the red zone. Wild animals cannot thrive on just 9%, and their habitat is getting fragmented. And even the ones in the ocean, we are basically bottom trawling an area the size of South America every year to catch the last remaining fish in the ocean. So they're all dying off too. So that land system change is now in the red zone, but it just got into the red zone. Next is climate change. Climate change is not even the worst transgression. It's only the 4th worst transgression. Okay. And climate change, we have put too much greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, and the planet is heating up. And if we leave it there as is now, it will heat up even more because it takes time for it to heat up. So there is a lot of heating already built into the system. So that is now in the red zone. Okay. Next is the nitrogen and phosphorus cycles. They're in the red zone. So we have taken too much nitrogen from the atmosphere and turning it into fertilizer. We've taken too much phosphorus from the land and turning it into fertilizer. And that's then causing over-fertilization of the riverbeds and the ocean floor. And when you over-fertilize the riverbeds and the ocean floor, it sucks out the oxygen in the water. And then the fish die because they don't have oxygen to breathe. Mm-hmm. So that's killing more than even climate change. That's killing more wildlife than even climate change right now. Okay, that's in the red zone. Next is chemical pollution. And that's way in the red zone. We are pouring 250 billion tons of toxic chemicals into the environment every year. So that's 30 tons per person per year. That's like 60,000 pounds of toxic chemicals into the environment every year per person. Okay, there are 8 billion of us doing this. That is way in the red zone because it is poisoning the water, it's poisoning the food for the animals, and the animals are eating that food and they're getting sick and they're dying. So it's killing more wildlife than even climate change or the phosphorus and nitrogen, the chemical pollution. And the last is loss of the biosphere integrity. So we're killing a lot of species. We are fragmenting their habitats. So they cannot meet each other anymore. And so they cannot have families anymore and they're dying off. Okay, they don't have a way to procreate and produce and propagate their species. So a lot of species are dying off, and the overall weight of the total weight of wild animals is declining exponentially. Between 1970 and 2010, we killed off 52% of all wild animals by total weight. Okay, and that became 58% by 2012 and 73% by 2020. So it's on track to hit 100% by 2029 at the current rate. Okay. So, and I'm saying, we have a Vegan World 2026 project because when I started calculating in 2010, I was projecting that we're going to hit 100% by 2026. I was saying we have to create a vegan world by 2026. Even now I say we have to create a vegan world by 2026 because you have to have remnants of wildlife still left for us to bring them back.
Right.
Okay. You can't kill them all off and then say, okay, let's start from scratch. Right. So this is why I say it's very important for all of us to realize that going vegan, the beauty of this, the solution is sitting there and staring at us in the face. Because if you go vegan, not only are you going to start healing yourself because the plant foods have the least amount of chemical pollution in them compared to animal foods. Because the animals are eating so many plants in order to give us their food. They eat 39 times as much plants as the food we get from them. So which means you get 39 times the concentration of chemical pollution in their food that you get from them. Okay. So when we eat plant foods, we start eating healthy, and simultaneously you will release 40% of the land area of the planet back to nature. And when you do that, as well as the entire ocean back to nature. So when you do that, the forests will come back. When the forests come back, they will start sucking up all the pollution. They will start cleaning up the mess that we have made. Okay? And you will address all 6 of these violations in one single act. All 6 of these violations will go from red towards green. Okay? To me, it's like the perfect system design. I mean, there's one single thing that I can do that will cause all of them to be solved. My God, nature is the perfect system design. Yeah. And it's like a fire hose you have. We have a fire on our planet, and we all have a hose. Okay, that's what we put into our body, what we consume. And with that vegan hose, you can put out the entire fire on the planet. And then you have to rebuild the planet, of course.
Wow. Ooh, that is flabbergasting, Dr. Rao, because our whole platform here is about being healthy for your divine purpose. But I love the way you talk about this idea that healing ourselves first, because at the end of the day, we are called to be stewards of our bodies. But here's the cap: we're also called to be stewards of the planet.
Right.
And so as we destroy ourselves, we push that out into the world and destroy the world. But they're all connected. Healing ourselves and healing the planet are our brother and sister, ultimately for our divine purpose. Because here's the thing: if we're not healthy, we can't live our divine purpose. But if
Right.
our planet is not healthy, then how are our children and our children's children going to be able to thrive as well? And so it's this interconnectivity, that you talk about. Can you go into? I would want you to kind of elaborate a little more, because I think somebody listening to this is saying, I hear you say a few times that going vegan can save the planet. Going vegan can save the animals. And I know you talked a little bit. Can you dig a little deeper in that for someone who just doesn't understand this concept at all, number one? But number two, if you could kind of get into the story about your why behind this. I know you have a wonderful story about making this promise to your granddaughter, and I think it will resonate with our audience, because I think we all want a better future for our children and our children's children. Talk about just a little bit more about the nuts and bolts on how going vegan, how me changing what's on the end of my fork is not only going to heal myself, but how is it going to heal the planet specifically?
Yeah. So let me give you let me tell you how I came to this realization. Okay. I was working with village women in India on their cooking. How do they cook? Because they use wood, and the wood was causing a lot of problems, not just for the forest, but for themselves too. And there was a professor from University of St. Louis working with me alongside on a separate project, and he was studying why do the women die 8 years younger than the men in the villages of India. The women's life expectancy is shorter than the men's life expectancy in the villages of India by 8 years. And he was studying that. And he was able to pinpoint the fact that they were cooking, that they are the ones who do the cooking. And that's what's causing them to die younger. And he determined that every time they cook a meal, it was as if they are smoking one pack of cigarettes. That's the equivalent of what was happening to their lungs. And he found out that the wood in the trees in this remote part of India, far away from 3 hours from the nearest city, that wood is filled with toxic chemicals from industrial processes. Okay, because the toxic chemicals that we pour into the environment, into the atmosphere, comes down in the rain. When it comes down in the rain, it's in the water. It's absorbed by trees. And trees are very good filters. So they filter the chemicals out and store it in their trunks. And they try to transpire pure water through their leaves. And they try to use the pure water for the fruits that they're making. That's their purpose. And so all the toxic chemicals are in the trunks and the branches of the trees. And that's what the women were using to burn, to cook. So they were getting, loads and loads of concentrated toxic chemicals. So it's as if they're smoking a pack of cigarettes every time they cook. So I realized that, that everything we do comes back to us. And it's in the plants and it's in the food. But when you eat the vegetables and the fruits, you're getting like the filtered version of the water. Okay. But if you eat the entire plant, you're going to get what the plant was absorbing. Now, we mostly feed the entire plant to the animals. We take the fruits for ourselves and the grains for ourselves, and we feed the stalks to the animals, right? So the animals are eating now the toxic food. And with animals are not very good filters. Our liver takes 7 years to reduce the toxins in our body by half. Okay? So, but then if you eat another load of toxins the next meal, how can it ever do that? So it's going to build up in your body. So when you eat animal foods, you're building up the toxins in your body and you're getting sicker and sicker over time. Now the system likes that, because when you get sicker and sicker, then you're going to come to them and ask them for medicine. So then you take the money out of your wallet and give it to someone. So you create economic activity in the system. So the system has been allowing this to happen because it's all about extracting from the planet, extracting from us also. So they're mining our health for profit, right? So I realized all this and I said, okay, I have to go vegan. So I went vegan on the spot and then I started making, helping documentaries to be made so that people get to know what is really going on the planet. Tell the story. And then help people understand that we are part of something much, much larger. Nature has been doing this life has been around for 4 billion years. So it's highly resilient. So the story I tell is that, we are in the 5th major ice age in the Earth's history. The ice age has been going on for 33.9 million years. It's called the late Cenozoic ice age. Okay. And during that time, she spawned us as a species. And she gave us fire, control of fire. What do you use fire for? You use fire to melt ice. So we have done that. So we spread out of Africa 50,000 years ago, went to every part of the world. And then in the warm period that happened 11,700 years ago, we started agriculture. And with agriculture, we actually chopped down forests. We started burning down forests. We started heating up the earth. And we prevented the earth from going back to another glaciation 5,000 years ago. So we have effectively ended the 5th major ice age in the Earth's history. So that's the plus side of what we have done. The negative side is that we have created a mess. Too much chemical pollution, too much deforestation, and we are all getting sick. We're a very sick species right now, right? We are getting diabetes, heart disease, cancer, you name it. Now we have been told there's a way out. Here's the way out. Go vegan, eat plants, bring back the forest, and the forest will then soak up the excess chemical pollution and store it. So you can clean up. In fact, all 6 of them we can clean up. The water cycle, we can clean up the water cycle if we bring back the forest on 40% of the land. The land use, we'll give it back to nature, 40% of the land. So that also goes from red towards green. Climate change, right now, the forests are storing twice as much carbon as in the entire atmosphere, and 4 times as much carbon as in all the fossil fuels we've burned to date, even though we have cut half the trees on the planet. So imagine when you bring back the trees that we cut, we can reverse climate change. Okay, right there. And then nitrogen and phosphorus loading, again, when we stop eating animals, we don't have to grow half the crops we're growing now. We only have to grow a little bit more than what we are growing now, what we are growing for our direct consumption, because half the crops are being fed to animals, and you don't have to do that anymore. So the nitrogen and phosphorus cycle also goes from red towards green. The chemical pollution goes from red towards green because all the trees will suck up all the chemical pollution and store it away. And finally, we'll give back land to nature and the ocean back to nature, and biodiversity has a chance to come back. So with one single act of going vegan and then allowing nature to reforest on 40% of the land area of the planet, we address all 6 planetary boundary violations. That's the beauty of it. So that's the beauty of this system that we call nature, that we are all part of. You heal yourself, and you heal humanity, and you heal the planet.
Yeah. So, Dr. Rao, just a couple things. I just want to dive into like two specific areas that you talked about: the nitrogen phosphorus runoff and the land use situations. The runoff, I had also read was the result of factory farms, specifically in the Midwestern part of the United States, running off into the Mississippi River, down into the Gulf, creating these dead zones.
Right.
And I think for those that are, listening to this, are thinking like, what does this have to do with me? Well, I mean, if you're going to a fast food restaurant, for example, you're going to whatever fast food restaurant you're going to and getting a burger, or, it could be a chicken sandwich or whatever it is, that these are the farms that supply these fast food chains. And it doesn't even have to be fast food. I'm just using that as an example.
Right.
It could be any, grocery store, Costco or Sam's Club or whatever. That these factory farms, the waste runoff from those farms seep into the waterways and then make their way down the rivers into these areas that create these dead zones, and then threaten, as you already talked about, the fish and the sea creatures that rely on those clean waters to survive and to thrive. And I think too, and I'm trying to relate this back to someone who's listening who might not be vegan right now, but maybe leaning in that direction, but doesn't quite see that environmental connection for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
That when you talk about land use, I mean, you look at the Brazilian rainforest, for example, which some call the lungs of the planet, right? And we have like decimated that rainforest, clearing land for cattle or feed for cattle, as you talked about. And that, these are like two very specific examples directly linking back to demand for animal products.
Right.
And if we don't buy it, they won't supply it. Right. It's that simple. So, if we just vote with our next meal, so to speak, and say, I'm not going to go through that fast food restaurant, I'm not going to get that burger, I'm not going to buy it for my spouse or my child or whatever, we're going to eat plants instead, that you are basically taking a stand to heal this planet, to take steps towards healing this planet by making that choice.
Right. Yeah, the nitrogen and phosphorus loading comes not just from the fertilizers we use, but also from all the nitrogen in the waste of the animals. Okay, our animals, our farmed animals, are 6 times the weight of all the wild animals that lived 10,000 years ago. So they're producing 6 times as much. Well, actually, they're producing more than 6 times. They're actually eating almost 12 times as much food as the wild animals used to eat, because they are all very young animals. As soon as they reach puberty, they're killed off. Or even before puberty, they're killed off. So they're eating way more than their weight would indicate, almost twice as much as their weight would indicate. So in effect, now we have created a system which is producing animal waste that's 12 times the waste that nature used to process when everything was fine 10,000 years ago. So she cannot process it. This is why it's causing all this deaths, among freshwater fish and saltwater fish and all that. Okay, so that's why when we go vegan, we reduce the biomass load of animals on the planet by an order of magnitude, because you don't have to grow all those animals anymore. You just eat the plants directly. Okay. Now, our weight alone, human beings, our weight alone is at least double the weight of all the wild animals that lived 10,000 years ago, all other species put together. So we are also a huge impact. But when we eat only plants, and then we can recycle our waste, okay, we can create soil with our waste. Okay? So I say that we can manage temporarily to have 8 billion people on the planet, but over time we have to reduce our population too, over time. But right now she can support us, okay, temporarily, as we repair the planet. So I see this as a system that has gone through and it has heated up so that the Earth can never go back another ice age again. And now she's telling us, now that you know that you can impact the life support systems of the planet, would you mind stabilizing it and maintaining it? You have no choice but to take her up on it. If we don't, we're going to die. Right? So we have to dance with nature now. We have to teach our children how to dance with nature because we are a powerful species. Because we have the control of fire. We have all this technology, right? That technology can be used to destroy. Technology can also be used to protect and prevent the next ice age from happening.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are in so much denial around this. They just would rather pretend like it doesn't exist because it's so overwhelming to imagine, a world, and especially those who maybe have lived their life, maybe in their 40s, 50s, they've lived a good chunk of their life, 60s, and they have children or grandchildren. It's such to say it's a huge pill to swallow is an understatement. What advice do you have for those people who might be listening and being like, I can't take this. This is too much for me. It's too overwhelming. Like, how would you coach them or converse with them if they're feeling that way?
Yeah, any system is complicated. Okay? Any system level solution looks complicated, but we kind of model it and then we figure out what is my place in it. How do I fit in it? Right? How do I contribute to this larger goal? And so that's how engineering is done. Engineering, one person cannot do. One person couldn't have invented the internet or anything like that, right? Millions of people had to be involved in it, right? And millions of people had to do their part to make it happen. So we are very good at creating projects in which we have an outcome and we figure out how every one of us contributes to that outcome. So I say to people, don't worry about the big picture. I mean, the big picture is, yeah, we know that things are, that we have the power to change the life support systems on the planet. We now know that, okay? We've known that for at least 3 decades now. Because as soon as the UN Rio summit, they admitted that we are causing climate change, biodiversity loss, and ecosystem collapse, we know we are impacting the life support systems of the planet. Okay? And when you know that, you should know that there is a way we can stabilize it too. Because if you can impact it in a bad way, you can impact it in a good way too. So you ask, how do I impact it in a good way? Well, actually, it's not that hard to understand. Just be kind to each other, kind to your body, kind to each other. Throw away traditions that don't work anymore and pick up new traditions that work. So it's a change in culture. It's a change in, and actually it's returning home to who we are. Because when we are born, we are automatically kind to everything. We don't want to hurt animals when we are born. Children don't want to hurt animals. So it's returning home to our true childlike nature. Okay? Because we got educated out of it. Because the education system is trying to convince us to become a climate heating species. That's what it's designed for. From a climate healing species to a climate heating species. And I'm saying, well, let's return back to the climate healing species that we were when we were born.
Yeah. And Dr. Rao, I just want to say you just triggered something in my mind when you said, go back to, who we were. And I remembered when I went vegan, this was back in 2012, I was listening to a video and this guy talked about, this is how this is how we're supposed to eat, okay? He said, if you put a toddler in a crib and you put a baby rabbit and an apple, which one is the toddler naturally going to eat? And I was like, wow. I mean, that just blew my mind right there. And we're taught to, kill and eat the animals. Not necessarily, it's not our innate nature, I think, when we're born. Yeah.
We are told it's necessary.
Yeah, we're told it's necessary.
And they tell you, It's actually a very clever way in which they tell you. They tell you um, protein is in meat. Okay, protein is in animal foods. So a good source of protein is animal foods. That's what we're taught in school, right? I was taught that in school. Now I find out that protein is in everything.
Yeah.
In fact, all amino acids are in all plant foods also.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, we are eating twice as much protein as we need in America, and we're eating only 1/3 the fiber we need.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, if you want to eat a balanced diet, you need to increase your fiber and reduce your protein. And that comes from eating more plants. So, it's we were all sort of deceived into thinking that is necessary. And that's the foundation of a climate heating system. That deception is the foundation of a climate heating system. For becoming a climate healing species, we just need to stay climate healing, meaning we were born a climate healing. So it has to be based on honesty and humility. Humility, knowing that you're only one of millions of species, and these are all fellow passengers on spaceship Earth, and we need them. We need them around to stabilize the life support systems of the planet. Okay, and so that's the humility, and the honesty is that we need to no more deception, no more conning people into one-upmanship. No more playing these finite games. So I'd say we play finite games in this system, in which there is a winner and all the rest are losers. Those are the kinds of games we play constantly. And when my granddaughter, I was playing with my granddaughter, she hated these games. She wanted only games in which there is no winner and no loser, that you can keep playing as long as you want until you get bored of it and move on to another one. So that's how children play.
Yeah, that's powerful. I know you, and can you talk a little bit about, because I know you mentioned in Kansas, you talked about the evolution of the science community in this field, and how, I don't know how many years ago you went into these climate change conferences, and you would go to the dinner that you guys would have after, and they'd be serving the animal products. And so you wrote this powerful letter, and you saw some change, and you were saying, talk about the process of what happened in the science community with your fellow peers that on one hand is studying climate change and all of that, but then on the other hand is participating in the destruction of what they're trying to resolve. Can you talk a little bit about that and how things have changed and how much further it needs to go?
Yeah, the system is based on money, and what gets funded and what doesn't get funded. So the scientific community is stuck doing work that only gets funded. They cannot do work that doesn't get funded. So through the funding mechanism, they're determining what questions get asked and what questions never get asked. So this is why science is separate from engineering. Engineering is where you take the science, you figure out what is the true science and who is trying to con you. So I constantly do that because I know people are trying to con me into using their product or their idea, because then they get a patent on it and they can make money off of my work, right? So I'm trying to figure out what is the right way to do this, because ultimately I am responsible for the product to work. And the product will not work until it's in alignment with nature. It has to be based on the truth. Okay? So I have to sift out fact from fiction and use the facts to build my base for the products that I'm building. So this is how I work as an engineer. So I'm looking at the science that they're doing and I'm saying, wait a minute, this is not how I would do science. This is not the science that I would use for my engineering. Okay? Because I went to the Paris climate change meeting in 2015, and I couldn't eat anything in the cafeteria for lunch. I had to go outside to eat. So I went and complained at the UN office. I said, what is this? I can't even eat, not even one dish. What's wrong with you guys? Don't you realize that this is a leading cause of climate change? So anyway, after that, they had one dish. They make sure that there is at least one dish that's vegan in the cafeteria. Okay. Then that December, I went and presented a paper with a colleague of mine from the University of Illinois, showing that if the world goes vegan and we restore forests on the land that gets freed up from animal agriculture, if you just, in the model, if you just take the original forest that used to be there and stick it in there in the model, the amount of carbon we store on land is greater than the amount of carbon we added to the atmosphere since 1750. And that's only on 40% of the land. Okay, 41% of the land. Because the other 59% of the land got deforested before before 1800. So we don't know. Okay, now we have a better idea because we have a few more years of work that's been done on that database. So now I can go back to 1500 also. So anyway, that's the paper we presented. And over 100 climate scientists came to talk to me during the presentation, because this is the largest gathering of climate scientists in the world, the American Geophysical Union fall meeting. About 20,000 climate scientists come to this meeting. So over 100 of them came to talk to me, and they said, "You're right, but it'll never happen." And I was wondering, why do they say it'll never happen? And then I attended the banquet dinner, and the main course was steak. There was nothing for me to eat at the banquet dinner. So I told them, I don't eat, because the alternative they had was vegetarian. It was lasagna with lots of cheese on it. And I said, I don't eat that either. So so they had to go make special meal for me. Okay. It took them 15 minutes. I was sitting at a table watching everybody else eat. And then they came and brought me pasta with tomato sauce. And so I wrote to the committee saying, this is what happened to me. And if you don't practice this, then how can you convince people that there is an emergency? How can you say there's a climate emergency while you're eating meat in the banquet? So they wrote back to me saying, yeah, from now on, we're going to have at least one vegan dish, etc. So they made that a policy now.
Yeah, and I would argue that needs to be the standard. It
Exactly.
needs to be what's on the menu, period. I mean, that's just ridiculous.
Right.
It's kind of like, I'm not a doctor, I'm actually a nutritionist, but some of the doctors that I interact with at some of my nutrition conferences have told me that when they go to medical conferences, not plant-based nutrition conferences, but medical conferences, a lot of times what's on the buffet line are bacon and eggs and sausages, right, and things that, basically contribute to whatever disease they specialize in, whether it's diabetes or heart disease or whatever, cancer. And it's just absolutely atrocious that there's such a high level of cognitive dissonance at a climate change convention or summit, that they would be so disconnected to what they're serving people. And because what that tells you is that if you're one of the only or one of the few that's even saying anything about it, it tells me that a large part of that group of people who are involved in this aren't practicing this in their daily routine. Right. Because nobody would be eating, right? So it's not like a mix up with the organizer in the hotel who's, providing the food. No, it's systemic across the people who are in charge of this crisis, which it's terrifying. Honestly, it's disgusting and terrifying at the same time.
Well, so they manage. We have a system in which you only do something if it makes money. Okay, if it's losing money, why would you do it? They don't want to do that, right? So they are sort of framing this in a way that you can make money selling electric cars and solar panels and wind turbines and so on, right? So it's all about economic growth, because remember, we are running a Ponzi scheme on the planet. And so it's all about economic growth. And how do you grow the economy? We have to keep doing more and more activities along the same lines. And I'm saying, as soon as you say economic growth, you're going to be stuck in a climate heating system. Why? Because right now, 90% of the healthcare costs come from 15 chronic diseases. and 8 risky behaviors that drive those chronic diseases, which means 90% of the healthcare economy is dependent on these 8 risky behaviors, which is poor diet, lack of exercise, smoking, lack of health screening, poor stress management, inadequate sleep, poor standard of care, and excessive alcohol consumption. This is according to the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. These are the 8 risky behaviors that they pointed out. Okay, so which means in a system that's trying to grow the economy, they're going to encourage these 8 risky behaviors because that's how you get more and more diabetes patients, more and more cancer patients for the hospitals to fill up. Okay? So we are stuck in a system in which you only do things that make more money. So I don't blame the scientists. They're stuck in a system that's saying, how do I make more money off of this climate change? And the only way I can make money off of this climate change is to frame it as a fossil fuel story and to change from fossil fuels to clean energy and simultaneously also grow the fossil fuel economy. Because that's what they're doing.
Yeah, I can't imagine. I just find it hard to believe that you can't do both. You know, you can't heal the planet and have economic growth. I mean, it just, are we, is it that we're just not smart enough to figure it out? Or is it that we're just too invested and tied to the status quo and the old way of doing things to try and reimagine a different scenario where we could have both economic growth and heal the planet and our bodies at the same time?
See, it depends on how you measure economic growth. Okay. Is economic growth measured in terms of how much throughput, how much of the resources of the planet are you taking and passing through a system? Okay. That's what economic growth is now based on. And that one, if you keep growing from where you are, you're going to keep accelerating the heating that's happening. So temporarily, we should say we're not interested in that. We have to create a new game in which we don't need growth. Why are we running after growth? Because we're running a Ponzi scheme. Ponzi schemes collapse if they don't grow. Okay, all Ponzi schemes collapse if they don't grow. And eventually all Ponzi schemes collapse, period. Because people figure out it's a Ponzi scheme. Right? And so our economy is a Ponzi scheme. And some people have figured it out, but most people haven't figured it out. It's a Ponzi scheme. This is why I don't participate in the economy anymore, like I used to. I'm not consuming more and more. In fact, I'm consuming as less as possible. You know what I mean? I'm trying to reduce. So I'm not participating in the growth story anymore of the economy. And in the same way, if everybody starts saying, okay, I don't want to participate in the growth story anymore, the economy collapses. But is that a bad thing? Is it a good thing? Now, right now the planet is saying, hey, enough, stop already. You're taking too much. You're already extracting 80% more than what the planet can support. So there shouldn't be any more growth in what we're extracting from the planet. We should be shrinking it. Okay? But to shrink it and simultaneously heal ourselves, that is the problem. That is the transformation that needs to happen. And to do that, you need to create a new economy based around healing and restoration. You need to create a new currency system that flows from the bottom up, not from the top down. So imagine a system that flows from the bottom up so that everyone feels like they belong in nature. They belong in the family of humanity. Right now, you don't belong in the family of humanity if you don't have money. You're going to starve to death. Okay? So that's the kind of system we have created. I'm saying you need to create a system in which everyone feels like they belong in the family of humanity to start with, which means they get money automatically. And then they are asked to contribute to the well-being of the planet in return for getting healthy food and good shelter and clothing. We are giving you that for free, but you have to contribute. Then you say, how many people want? Some people may not want to contribute. That's fine. That means they're sick. If you're healthy, you want to do something. You know what I mean? No healthy person ever sits around saying, when there's a problem, when there's a fire, they won't sit around saying, you do the bucket brigade. I'm not part of it. No, everyone will be forming the bucket brigade, right? So I say that this is why I say healing is number one. Healing ourselves is number one. And when you feel like you belong in the whole, then you will contribute automatically to the well-being of the planet. And now we have a different economy that's not based on growth, it's based on contribution and minimizing your impact on the planet. So we need to get to a point where you're minimizing your impact on the planet and maximizing your contribution to the planet. Only then will the planet get better and better over time, right?
Whew. That was powerful, because what you're saying, it's like revamping our whole ideology. It's literally saying we're not fixing the system, we're actually tearing it down and recreating it. I think that is even more radical, because I think we have been hypnotized into this consumer, get, more, especially in the Western world, where we have so many things at our fingertips. You have 1,000 dresses and 1,000 shoes and 5 cars. Like, we are at the pinnacle of what this looks like.
Right.
Are there any, and I don't know this, I'm just asking this, are there any societies on this planet that you have discovered that emulates more of this contribution model that hasn't been infiltrated by this capitalism and this driven way? Do you see it working somewhere that you can point to, that we could even see as inspiration? Have you seen that?
Yeah. So all indigenous societies were in the contribution model, more of the giving, because they were maintaining their environment around them. Okay, they've done it for thousands of years, and then they can come into contact with industrial civilization and they get corrupted. Either they get kicked off their land and they're sent to the slums in the cities, where they have to now figure out how to survive, or they see, I come there with a phone and they say, how do I get that phone? Wow, that's amazing. I can take a picture of myself. So they get mesmerized by the things we bring. And we tell them, if you want this phone, you have to have money. They say, okay, what is money? And we tell them, okay, go extract something from there that we can use, and then we'll give you money. So they get suckered into it. Okay. And then they get hooked into it and they become part of it. So I say that those communities are going to get suckered into it, whether we like it or not. But you have to go to a community that was built out of the industrial civilization. And there are communities like that. So I go to a forest in India called Sadhana Forest. Okay. They have a forest festival every year. And in that forest, people come from all over the world, and their purpose is to restore the forest that used to be there. Okay. And they get fed healthy food. They have shelter, but simple shelter. It's just a hut. And you have a bed you can sleep in, and you get food. And you wake up every morning, you do your yoga, you do your meditation, and then you go and plant some trees. And you go take care of the animals. You take care of the functioning of the community. Okay, so there's so many things that need to be done. So there's someone who walks around saying, okay, this needs to get done. Who's going to volunteer for this? Who's going to volunteer for this? So she does the volunteering, and she keeps track of who's going to do this. And the community runs like that. Okay. Now, these are people who have phones, who have laptops, who are connected to the industrial civilization, but they've seen through it. They know that there is something beyond this. That this is not for entertainment. This is a tool that we can use to find, how do we get this? How do we get that? So recreating and restoring the forest. What needs to be done for that? So what was there here? So there's databases that you can go to see what is going on. So that's what we use it for. All of these technologies are really tools. Depends on what you use it for. Your intention is what matters.
Awesome. Well, I want to pivot a little bit and talk about a book you published called Pinky Promise. Can you share a little more about that book? Like, what was the impetus behind it, and a little more for people who are watching or listening?
Yeah, sure. It's a book I wrote. Actually, I've been saying these stories for a while, and people told me, you need to write it down as a book. So I wrote it, I published it last year, and basically it helps. Uh, I documented how I went from being a climate heater to a climate healer, and how my granddaughter helped me do that, okay, by just being herself. And so she illustrated the book, so you can see all her illustrations, and her mom also illustrated some of the um, figures in the book. And basically, you can see it's a 12-step process. It's literally like going through an AA, you know. So first you surrender, saying, I don't know, teach me. I've been so mesmerized by all this. I don't know what's right, what's wrong anymore. Just teach me. And then treating her as if, she's the most amazing thing that ever happened to me. That helped create a relationship in which she was open with me. And she would tell me things, and I would see, oh my God, that's what she means. So she taught me about violent stories. Our stories are violent, that we teach our children violent stories. And if you tell non-violent fairy tales to children, they won't grow up to be heaters. They'll remain healers. Okay, and also games. We play finite games, and the object of a finite game is to win the game. And she plays infinite games. And the object of infinite game is to continue the game forever. There's no winning or losing. It's just playing. It's the process of playing that she likes. Okay? So there's never a match. There's never who's better than who. None of that stuff happens. That. So that's another thing. And then she basically taught me that I'm just going back to who I am, who I was as a child. Right? So if you look at the 12-step process that's in the book, you will realize that now we have to let our children educate us. Our children should be essentially de-educating us out of being climate healers and back to being climate healers. And imagine that, right? So you have a whole generation that's going to be re-educated by children. So there's no point in sending children to school to educate them, because they're being educated to become climate heaters. Why would you do that now? We don't need more climate heaters. We need climate healers. So which means we need to some of us have to become climate healers, right, from climate heaters. So I say that this transformation, it's really not dismantling the old. It's actually building the new and dissolving the old into the new. And that's what she helped me understand. So there is there's a video by a sociologist called Martha Beck. And she talks about how this system is literally going to dissolve into the new, as opposed to being fighting with each other and dismantling it, because you cannot create peace with violence. So the means also have to be peaceful. So it's recognizing that we are all just one family. We were one family in Africa before we moved out of Africa and went to every part of the world, right? So I use this to explain evolution. I was using this analogy, not an analogy, it's really like a mechanism. Imagine that you're standing on the street and you're holding your mother by your hand, and you ask your mother to bring her mother to stand by her side, and then you get your great grandmother, and so on. So you create a long line of mothers on this side of the street. And the other side of the street, you ask another human being to do that. Any random human being, any other random human being to do the same thing. Within 4 miles, these two lines will merge. Because both lines are going to say, hey, that's my mama too. Less than 4 miles, okay? They'll merge. And if you do that with a chimpanzee, it's about 100 miles. They'll merge. So that's the story I told my granddaughter, and she immediately understood that animals are her family. right? And then she said, why are people eating my family? And then she made me promise that I will create a world for her in which people don't have to eat their family. A vegan world by 2026.
2026, we got 2 years.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank
I
you
mean,
for
it's going to happen, Gigi
yeah.
and Sersie, because to me, it's like, when you notice there is a fire in your home, you don't continue your routines. You don't
Mhm.
say, oh, now I have breakfast, now I have lunch. No, you put out the fire first, do you not?
Yeah.
So we have a fire in our planetary home. You have to get up and act like it is. There's a fire and put it out. And I told you what the fire hose is. And if
Yeah.
the world goes vegan, we can do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for ringing the alarm, because I think that, the analogy that you're using about the fire, it's the fire alarm. And I think that's the work that you're doing, Dr.
Right.
Rao, is that you have set the fire alarm. So it's for us to heed that sound. That we could buffer it out if we want to, but if we will just heed to the alarm, we can all take action. So thank you so much for all the amazing work that you are doing. And we're on board for Vegan for 2026. We're on
Right.
board in any way that we can do it. So
Thank you so much, Dr. Rao. Is there any final words you want to leave us with before we wrap up?
Well, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for listening, and hearing the alarm, and I mean, framing it like that, it's beautiful. I really love that. And I also tell people, look, have faith. We are part of something much, much larger, and she knows what she's doing. She's using us.
Mm-hmm.
She used us to stop the ice age from carrying on, and given us all the tools we need to solve the problem.